Chief Justice John Roberts is worried that in the next Trump administration, it will be completely lawless, something, of course, he and the other MAGA created. He's so worried about it that he talks about it at length in his annual report to close out the year. His fear that the executive branch and others will not follow the direction of the judiciary, that their role will be undermined because their laws and rules and decrees will not be followed by, oh, let me guess, Donald Trump. In fact, somebody that looks, acts, and talks exactly like Donald Trump shows up throughout the annual report as something that seems to be keeping Chief Justice Roberts up at night. I cover it right here on Legal AF, the YouTube channel. Take a minute. I'll still be here when you get back. Hit the subscribe button, and let's move on with the hot take. Annual reports are created by the Chief Justice. They decide what they're going to talk about, how they're going to arrange it, and all of that. Usually it has some statistics at the back about caseload and all of that. This year, he could have picked any number of topics, but he picked what seems to be on his mind, the incoming Trump administration. He doesn't say it by name, but there's no other way to interpret it. Okay. So no, there's no mention of how the immunity decision by the U.S. Supreme Court threw over the apple cart of an equally balanced, co-equal branches of government and destroyed our checks and balances. Didn't talk about that. Didn't talk about Sam Alito currying favor with monarchists abroad and taking gifts and things without disclosing them, and flying flags of insurrection at two of his homes during the year. Didn't talk about that. Didn't talk about Clarence Thomas lining his pockets, millions of dollars of luxury gifts and travel, involving people who have business before the court. Skip that as well. Get right down to what apparently is making him at 4:00 in the morning toss and turn at night. Donald Trump. Join the line, Chief Justice Roberts. Let's get to it. Here's what he says of what he is worried about. It is not in the nature of judicial work to make everyone happy, he says. Everything I'm going to read you now is from Chief Justice Roberts in his annual report just published. Most cases have a winner and a loser. Every administration suffers defeats in the court system, sometimes in cases with major ramifications for executive or legislative power or other consequential topics. Nevertheless, for the past several decades, the decisions of the courts, popular or not, have been followed, and the nation has avoided the standoffs that plagued the 1950s and 1960s. That's the civil rights movement. Within the past few years, however, elected officials from across the political spectrum have raised the specter of open disregard for federal court rulings. These dangerous suggestions, however sporadic, must be soundly rejected. And then he quotes Ruth Bader Ginsburg. What he's worried about here is that he believes that our political system and economic strength depend on the rule of law, and that Article 3 judges under the Constitution are the ones that need to declare that. He then goes on page 8 to declare Chief Justice Taft, who used to be a president, is the only person to have served as head of the judicial and political branch. As he put it, nothing tends more to render judges careful in their decisions and anxiously solicitous to do exact justice than the consciousness that every act of theirs is to be subject to the intelligent scrutiny of their fellow men and their candid criticism. But violence, intimidation, and defiance, Roberts writes, directed at judges because of their work undermine our republic and are wholly unacceptable. That's an attack on Donald Trump. I mean, when he says that there are political actors that are doxing and attacking judges, which undermines their independence, he's talking about Donald Trump. There's no Democrat counterpart to this. On page 7, he says, public officials, too, regrettably have engaged in recent attempts to intimidate judges. For example, suggesting political bias in the judges' adverse rulings without a credible basis for such allegations. Who's he talking about? That's Donald Trump, spreading misinformation, attacking family members of judges. We got time. Tell me one Democrat that's done that. Hunter Biden didn't do it. Senator Menendez didn't do it. Who did it? Donald Trump. So this is what keeps Roberts up at night, that he's going to issue a ruling that the executive branch is not going to execute, they're going to ignore, and that could happen. In the 1960s, let's say for desegregation and trying to get black children into entirely white schools, like in Little Rock and other places, when the federal courts announced, and the Supreme Court announced that that was going to happen. It took the executive branch, the FBI, the Department of Justice, RFK, who was then the head of the Department of Justice as the Attorney General, both Johnson and Kennedy, to order that federal officials bust through those doors and get those children into that school when they were being opposed by governors of various states. You have to have that political will. You have to have that leadership. But if the executive branch were to ignore, if this is obviously Roberts' fear, that Donald Trump is going to ignore an unpopular decision that he doesn't like, and he's not going to enforce it. He wants all of his laws enforced, but he'll ignore the ones that he doesn't respect or he doesn't want to accept. But who created this problem? The Supreme Court created this problem. They empowered Donald Trump. They enabled Donald Trump. They created a Frankenstein in Donald Trump. And they tore down many of the guardrails that protect the very constitutional republic that John Roberts cares so deeply about, at least pen to paper. He spent half of it giving me a lesson. I mean, I guess the American people a lesson. I knew most of this coming out of law school about King George and other United States Supreme Court justices. Let's get to it, man. Take personal responsibility. Take the plane up 10,000 feet and look down at the landscape of what you and your other right-wing judges created between the Colorado decision, the 14th Amendment decision on insurrection, and the immunity decision, and all the other ways you sided with Donald Trump, putting your finger on the scale of justice in his favor. Look what you've created. Not just today, not just for the second term of Donald Trump, but for future Donald Trumps. I can imagine a worse Donald Trump. I really can. But because now the underpinnings of it, the makings of it are already in place and are now baked into Supreme Court precedent. And we're going to have to live with it. So, this crocodile tears thing that John Roberts just published, this year-end report, where he's saying, oh, there's a monster roaming the countryside. Frankenstein, pick up your pitchforks and your torches. Yeah, we got it. Who do you think created it? Who is Dr. Frankenstein? You. So we're going to continue to follow the hypocrisy at the federal court system, primarily at the United States Supreme Court system, through here right here on Legal AF. We've got Court Accountability Action, an amazing group, does amazing research and leads the charge against corruption in the federal court system. They're here with us on Legal AF. I do a show with Dina Dahl called Unprecedented every week about the United States Supreme Court. And then, of course, we do unique custom content, law and politics, that hot corner right here, 5-6 times a day on Legal AF. So until my next reporting, I'm Michael Popok. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.